Today we arrived in Fort Bragg, eager to check out Glass Beach. Glass Beach is a beach where the sand is replaced entirely by sea glass, created from years of dumping garbage into an area of coastline near the northern part of Fort Bragg. However, when we arrived, we only found this to be partially true. After years of people taking the glass, the beach is no longer entirely made from sea glass. In fact, the main part of the beach was actually blocked off, so we hopped the fence with another couple we met to check out the good part of the beach. The remainder of the day was spent driving up the Pacific Highway to a lay-by where we were able to stay for the night. Now, I have a soft spot for cheesy tourist traps, and I'd heard about this place a lot. It's a really quaint little roadside attraction you'll find along the Redwood Highway. I'm a big fan of the show Gravity Falls, and apparently this place served as the inspiration for the Mystery Shack from that show. It also serves as the resting place for the Bill Cipher statue, which was the goal of an international treasure hunt launched when the show ended. Gravity Falls stuff aside, Confusion Hill is a really fun tourist attraction in and of itself. It must have been a really quiet day when we went, because we were pretty much the only ones there, besides the friendly owners. Highlights were the Gravity House. You can see from these pictures the optical illusion the house creates, and the train ride, a quaint little tour and history lesson. After all that, we continued driving up north towards Redwood National Park. Driving through the Avenue of the Giants, a long stretch of road that weaves between giant redwood trees, a true old-growth forest. Our overnight parking spot that night was beside a quiet road overlooking a freshwater lagoon in some national forest just outside Redwood National Park. Really pretty spot. We woke up nice and early to this beautiful view of freshwater lagoon and got prepared for our day at Redwood National Park. I had no real plans for Redwood, so our first action was to check into the visitor centre to ask about hikes. They suggested the Lady Bird Trail, a pretty easy walk that only took us about an hour, but there were a lot of information signs along this trail teaching us about the local plants and fauna. The other thing we were told about in the visitor centre was Fern Canyon, and after a bit of a rough drive down a gravel road, we got as close as we could to the canyon. Unfortunately, a river ford stopped us from driving any further, so we parked up beside the river and just walked the rest of the way. Scenes from Jurassic Park were filmed in Fern Canyon, and by walking through it, you could tell. It really feels like walking back in time into the Jurassic era. On our way out of the park, we passed through this beautiful meadow where we saw a herd of Roosevelt elk, which made Alicia very happy. Oh, and here's our Redwood National Park merchandise. That evening, we found a beautiful overnight parking spot overlooking a beach. We parked up and made some food. when all of a sudden another van, the exact same as ours, showed up. And then another couple of vans showed up. And before we knew it, we were all hanging out drinking beer and chatting about our travels. It was really nice. One couple was planning on driving from North America all the way down to South America via the West Coast. Another couple, John and Nikita, had come all the way from Kentucky in a van painted like the American flag. They also had a very nice dog. One of our most memorable evenings of the trip for sure. It was a bunch of strangers all just congregating on this one place one evening for a bit of a party, honestly.
Big loop, big stuff.
So another one of these classic North Californian roadside attractions is the Trees of Mystery. If you want to see wacky trees, this is the place. Marked with a big Paul Bunyan statue out front, Trees of Mystery has a lot of nice walks, tons of art, even a gondola system to the top of a mountain.
We're above things. We're in with the Redwoods, the big boys. And there's so much further to go. Oh, fuck, it's broken. That'd be nice one for my dad.
Once at the top, we had a choice of either going back down via the gondola or walking down a very steep hiking trail. Naturally, I chose the steep walk. A super fun day trip. I would highly recommend it if you're in the area. We both had a lot of fun here. Once we had finished looking around the Trees of Mystery, we drove for about an hour north and crossed our first state border into Oregon. One of the first things we quickly learned about Oregon is that it's actually illegal to fill up your own petrol here. Very bizarre. So I was at a petrol station, and before I'd even parked the van properly, some guy started to approach the van. We were both a little confused and sketched out at first, so I wound the window down, and once he asked how much fuel I wanted, I suddenly remembered that this was a thing. Super bizarre and kind of dumb in my opinion, but at the very least it was pretty convenient. Anyway, once we got petrol, we found a spot to park up for the night, in some suburb about an hour away from Crater Lake. We really wanted to take a boat tour to Wizard Island, and so after a little research we discovered that you should either book in advance or get there super early in the day to secure your boat ride. So upon learning this, we decided to drive an extra hour at night to get as close as possible to Crater Lake. We ended up finding an area right outside the park boundaries and made sure to set our alarm so that we could get to the visitor centre as soon as it opened to book that boat ride. The next morning we were at the visitor centre, a good 30 minutes before it even opened. Once it opened, I went in immediately to book this boat tour. That's when we were told the boats have been cancelled for the next day or so. I don't remember the exact issue, but one of their boats wasn't working properly, and that meant they couldn't take any more bookings. It was a real disappointment after all that, but I wasn't going to let it ruin my day. After all, perhaps they'd be working again tomorrow. So we drove to this car park overlooking Wizard Island and cooked breakfast. Since it was still super early, the water on the lake was perfectly still, causing this amazing reflectiveness. It was absolutely stunning. We even had some of the wildlife join us for breakfast. We drove around the western side of the lake and picked up some hitchhikers who were walking the Pacific Crest Trail, and they wanted a lift north. They told us about these hot springs just outside of Crater Lake, and since we'd decided to be at Crater Lake tomorrow for the hike and hopefully that boat to Wizard Island, we thought checking out these hot springs would be a good use of our time. So we got there and enjoyed a relaxing afternoon in these hot springs, where we saw a lot of naked people. So it seems like a lot of people like to use these hot springs while nude, but we weren't feeling quite that adventurous. Our campsite for tonight was a real nice one, but still not a paid one, of course. We found this really lovely free campsite just outside the park boundaries in the surrounding national forest. There were benches, fire pits, toilets, and even water faucets to fill up our tank. We had a lovely evening here. Alicia even found the time to work on her scrapbook a bit. Today we got up nice and early and headed straight back into Crater Lake for our hike. Unfortunately, the boats were still not running. So the hike wasn't very far in distance, but included following a ton of switchbacks all the way down a steep cliff into the lake itself. The way down was easy enough. Once at the bottom, we spent hours swimming in Crater Lake, and had filmed loads of this on the GoPro, lots of underwater footage. It was really cool, but unfortunately that footage was all lost. But I won't dwell on that too much again. Walking back up and out of the crater was a bit more of a challenge. Nothing too crazy, but pretty steep. After that, we got back in the van and drove around the entire rim of Crater Lake, stopping at many of the overlooks and taking loads of photos. Something we learned about Crater Lake is that it's not actually a crater, but a volcanic caldera. So Wizard Island is essentially an active volcano, within the more dormant caldera that is Crater Lake. It's a volcano within a volcano. Another fun fact, Crater Lake has its very own species of newt, aptly named the Crater Lake newt, although we didn't see any. The rest of our time in Crater Lake was spent checking out the visitor centres, learning about how the lake was formed, and of course, as always, here's our postcard and patch we picked up at one of the visitor centres. We considered the idea of staying just one more night here and trying again tomorrow for that boat to Wizard Island, but decided against it ultimately as we were concerned about getting to Montana in time. That evening we travelled further north, through the city of Bend, where we found a national forest to sleep in. Bend is actually the last location of a Blockbuster video store in all of the United States, but I only discovered this fun piece of trivia once we'd already left. A shame too, since I would have liked to see that. As we carried on driving north, we reached the Deerite Observatory, an observation structure made out of lava stone, located in the Mackenzie Pass area of the Cascade Mountains. In fact, this whole area was full of lava stone, as far as the eyes could see. Obviously, a while back, a nearby volcanic eruption must have caused lava to flow through this pass. It was very bizarre and almost felt like standing on the surface of another world. Super cool. We decided to keep pushing forward towards Portland, as I didn't really have anything much else planned between here and there. A few hours later, we found a parking spot just beside some railway tracks on the outskirts of the city of Portland. I actually didn't have a whole lot planned in Portland. I just wanted to check out this horror-themed bar called the Lovecraft Bar, but I don't think it's called that anymore, actually. Obviously, this was the morning, and the bar wasn't going to open until much later, so we had the whole day to kill. We had a pretty great night partying with the locals. At some point the previous night, we made our way back to the van. I don't remember the details, though. In the morning, I found a card from some police officer letting us know that we were parked on land owned by the railway company and that we really shouldn't be here. Thankfully, there was no fine or anything. It just seemed to be more of a warning. Oh well, we were moving on from Portland today anyway. Before leaving Oregon, I absolutely had to check out the Timberline Lodge atop Mount Hood. The Timberline Lodge is actually the filming location for the exterior shots of the Overlook Hotel in The Shining, one of my favourite movies of all time. When we reached the turning for Mount Hood, we were surprised to see a massive queue of traffic. The Timberline Lodge is a ski resort in the winter, but it wasn't the right season for that, so we were very confused to see this. So as it turned out, it was Labor Day, which is a national holiday in the US. I'm not really sure what it's all about though. Anyway, there was some sort of Labor Day festival happening at the Timberline Lodge today. I was initially a bit annoyed by this, since I thought we'd have to pay to get in, and all I wanted to do was just look around at the lodge and see the architecture and whatnot. But apparently not. It was a free festival of sorts, I guess. Unfortunately, I don't have any photos of all of this, since I was mostly filming, but we ended up having a really great time. We made our own tie-dye t-shirts, and I even went on a little bit of a hike up the mountain. I didn't get to the summit or anything, mostly because I forgot to bring water, but I did get to a point where it was cold enough to see snow, so that was pretty cool. That night we slept in the very small town of Hood River, in a Walmart car park, sandwiched between Mount Hood and the Columbia River, which acted as a border between Oregon and Washington. On our last day in Oregon, we decided to check out Multnomah Falls, a very iconic waterfall located along the Columbia River. We decided to hike all the way to the top of the waterfall, which wasn't a super long walk honestly, but it was all pretty steep and uphill the whole way, so it wasn't exactly easy. At the top, we got an amazing view of the Columbia River and our first glimpse into Washington. On our way back down, we made this little moth friend who attached itself to Alicia's shirt. Once we were back on the road, we made our way towards the Bridge of Gods, which crosses the Columbia River. We crossed the Bridge of Gods and entered Washington. We still had some time left in the day, but I'll talk about that in the next episode. Actually, no I won't. I think I can squeeze Washington State into the rest of this episode as well. So after crossing the Bridge of the Gods into Washington, I found a short hike on the opposite side of the Columbia River called Beacon Rock. I think I was supposed to get a permit to go up here, but I didn't bother. It was about an hour of winding wooden bridges to a modest 848-foot high summit, but offered some great views of the Columbia River from the Washington side. We still had plenty of time left today, so we decided we'd drive to Mount St. Helens. So after about a 2.5-hour drive, we were at the Johnson Ridge Observatory, with great views of the north side of Mount St. Helens. The sun was starting to set though, so we drove away from the mountain to find a place to sleep. Tomorrow we would go for a hike. Okay, so this is a rather strange experience. That night, as Alicia and I were trying to sleep, we both heard what I'm certain was footsteps in the gravel car park just outside the van. We both listened closely, and the footsteps seemed to be circling the van. Naturally, we were both terrified. Could it be a bear? Well, from what we could tell, the footsteps sounded to be bipedal. But what sort of animal walks on two legs? We were miles from any civilization, and it was gone midnight, so a late-night hiker seemed unlikely. If it were a park ranger checking in on us, we would have seen the lights from his vehicle. Once the footsteps had stopped, I peered outside of one of the van windows. It was pitch black and I couldn't see anything, besides a small red light off in the distance, which I didn't see earlier in the night. To this day, I still have no idea what we heard outside our van, so that was sort of scary. Today we got to have a good time and went for a super long walk to Spirit Lake and back. Unfortunately, most of this hike was captured on the GoPro, so I only have very few photos. If you didn't know, Mount St. Helens is actually an active volcano which erupted most recently in 1980. Here's a before and after so you can see just how much of the mountain got destroyed post-eruption. That night, we finally decided to treat ourselves to a fancy paid campsite, mostly to have a shower. I remember taking advantage of the fact that we had unlimited electricity for a night to finally start watching Avatar: The Last Airbender, something which became a regular tradition for us most evenings going forward on this trip. Today was mostly just a travel day. We stopped briefly off in what felt like some guy's garden to look at some metal sculptures he had made, but I didn't get any photos of them besides this one. The only other photos I have of this day are of this hole that formed in the floor of our van, which prevented us from being able to use our table. Today we decided to check out Mount Rainier National Park. We decided to walk the nice, easy, yet very picturesque Nisqually Vista Trail, which led us through some beautiful subalpine meadows with incredible views of Mount Rainier itself. We also met all sorts of bug friends on this walk, plus a pool of tadpoles. Not to mention these curious grouse who made some very endearing little noises.
What about you? Say hello.
Mount Rainier felt so full of life. We couldn't find a patch at the visitor centre, but here's the postcard I got. Today we'd arrive at Olympic National Park, at the visitor centre for the Hoh Rainforest, which is one of the largest temperate rainforests in the United States. After talking to a park ranger, they suggested we do the Hall of the Mosses trail to get the most out of Hoh Rainforest in one day. This was a beautiful little trail, which really showed off the thick moss-dense rainforest in all its glory. Additionally, we found time to also do the nearby Spruce Bottom Nature Trail, where towards the end we caught a glimpse of an owl. The only way I could get a photo of this elusive creature was to take a photo through Alicia's binoculars. course, here's a photo of our Olympic National Park merch as well. Today we followed around the Olympic Peninsula to go to another region of Olympic National Park. That would be Hurricane Ridge. This ridge looked to feature stunning views of mountains found throughout Olympic. However, when we got there, the weather was far from ideal. It was so foggy we could barely see anything. Not wanting to bother going on a walk without seeing any views, we opted to stay in the visitor centre, hoping the weather would clear up. We spent over an hour filming a time-lapse of the clouds and the mist swirling around the semi-visible mountains, but you'll have to imagine that because this time-lapse is another unfortunate and tragic lost video from the GoPro. As we drove back down the mountain, we did see this little deer, so that was quite nice. That night, I believe we slept in a Walmart car park in the town of Sequim. Today was mostly just another travel day. We went to a Cabela's for the first time ever, a huge outdoor store selling all sorts of equipment featuring a mountain display in the centre with real taxidermy animals displayed throughout. It was very cool. During the nighttime, we also drove through Seattle without stopping at all. I couldn't really think of anything I wanted to do or see in Seattle, apart from maybe the Space Needle. We were heading up towards the North Cascades National Park, and that night found a rest area to sleep in. Today we arrived in the North Cascades, but only had a drive-through tour for today. So we checked out the visitor centre, found this cool train, got some incredible views of Diablo Lake. We also went for a short walk along Ross Dam and back. A good introduction to the park, but I feel like I was craving another big hike. We returned back to the rest area we had stayed the previous night with the intent to head back into the park the following day for a good big hike. So today I went on a long, strenuous hike up Sourdough Mountain, while Alicia stayed back at Thunder Creek to do some fishing. I had agreed to be back by a certain time, and I'm not sure how far up the mountain I got, but I was running out of time. When some passing hikers said they'd seen a black bear, I decided to turn around. I didn't want to worry Alicia, and I certainly didn't want to run into a bear without any bear spray. So unfortunately, I didn't get to see the summit. I'm not sure if I was close or not, but the hike was rewarding regardless. Once I was back from the hike, we filmed another great time-lapse on this pier that Alicia was fishing on. Another tragic piece of lost footage. Fortunately, I did think to take lots of nice photos here as well. For our penultimate day in Washington, we drove to a small, intriguing town called Index. It's an absolutely tiny town with a population of less than 200, nestled in the Cascade Mountain range. Apparently a lot of tourists come here to climb. We just decided to sit in a cafe and get some food and enjoy the atmosphere. After spending our morning in a cafe in Index, we carried on following the road to a hiking trail, which led to Haybrook Lookout, an old wooden firewatch tower. Naturally, I took no photos again, relying purely on now lost video footage. Strangely, the only photos I have is of this slug eating a mushroom. After that, we carried on following the road towards Leavenworth, a Bavarian-styled village. However, before we got there, we spotted this amazing 1950s-style chrome diner called Diner 59er. We just had to go in. I think we only ordered milkshakes and a dessert here, but the theme was incredible. I'd highly recommend anyone check this out if you're ever in the area. Once we reached Leavenworth, we had an enjoyable evening strolling around the place, checking out the shops, and enjoying the atmosphere. I have no idea why a Bavarian village exists in the middle of Washington state, but it certainly was interesting, and it felt like we were somewhere in Europe rather than the United States, at least for an evening. That evening we continued driving east, far out of the Cascade Mountains, towards the flatter, rolling plains of East Washington. After driving for nearly 4 hours, we slept on some Bureau of Land Management land about an hour west of Spokane. Today was pretty much just another travel day. We got this little fella in Walmart in Spokane, and that's about all we did in this city before making the 4.5-hour drive eastbound towards Columbia Falls, Montana, to meet our friend Eileen and her family. On this drive, we did cut through the Idaho Panhandle, so technically I visited that state, only stopping once to get petrol. It's only now I've realised Idaho might be the only state I've visited without taking a single photo. Once we finally reached Columbia Falls, we spent the evening with Eileen and her family, who graciously let us stay with them, but more on that next time. Anyway, next episode, I will be back to using actual video footage instead of photos. This will probably mean I can focus on specific areas a lot more. As such, I doubt another episode will be me blasting through 5 different states, all in the same video, but who knows, on the East Coast the states are quite small. Hopefully I can stay motivated to get a few more of these videos out, because we've still got so much more of the country to cover. Thank you for watching.